Welcome, everyone. Mr. Lasher was going to be up first with his presentation update on signals, and then Russ is going to share with us his rebuild of his freight house on his New York Central Railroad, and then Joe Fields is going to talk to us about his scenery that he's working on for his last certificate for his MMR. But wanted to remind you that next Saturday, a week from today, same time, same place, we'll have our first ever Division 8 bowl session. I know you're all looking forward to sharing your own bowl. The really good news is Mark Hedge is going to be the host, so he's never at a loss for words. So you probably all can just sit back and Mark can entertain us for an hour. And then our next gathering is just about a month from today on January 9th, our first gathering of 2021. We already have presenters lined up for it, but we won't list those now. You'll be looking forward to reading about it in the pie card. And then one last fine thing before we get going, I just would like to say thanks to Kevin Jones for sharing his mini clinic with us on his development of his laser cutter. Been very interesting, and we're looking forward to some more cutting, Kevin. Thanks for sharing. Mr. Lasher, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, this is part two. I'm going to talk about some variations on automatic block signal systems and control systems. Part three is going to be about controlled signals, interlockings, and their close cousins, centralized traffic control systems. And there are some variations on all of those. And then the final part, we're going to try to tie this all together about how it pertains to your modeling and some things to do that you can do to make your modeling of a signal system more authentic. And that will be the last part of it. As we previously learned in part one, William Robinson's track circuit was the basis for modern signaling. However, it was ahead of its time and had to wait for other technology developments to mature before it could really come into its own. Reliable relays, improved batteries, and long life light bulbs all had to mature before signaling could become a practical proposition. This obviously is an automatic block signal, and it's displaying stop and proceed. But at the turn of the century, there wasn't even an agreement on standard colors for signaling. For instance, on some roads, green meant danger and white meant clear. In the early 1900s, Corning Glass Company hired Dr. William Churchill, who, working with a psychologist of all people, determined the colors that your eye was most receptive to and developed standard glass colors for signal lenses. So with these technologies in place, many roads began installing basic automatic block signal systems that weren't much more advanced than the simple system that we discussed in the last session. They could be either semaphores or color light signals. Soon, enhancements to the basic systems began to appear. By the way, Southern Pacific's line up from Los Angeles through the Mojave Desert to Bakersfield was the only place I've ever run across a bare bones ABS system, and it was really great for train watching. But the problem with the basic ABS system, where you'll find signals paired, one for each direction on either side of an insulated joint, is that it offers little protection for opposing movements. It would be theoretically possible for two opposing trains to enter the same block at exactly the same time so that neither would pass a stop signal, and having only passed yellow approach signals could meet each other doing 40 miles per hour or so, which is not good, which leads us to overlap. And in response, the signal companies came out with an enhancement that was referred to as overlap as part of an upgraded signal system known as absolute permissive block signaling. With overlap installed, as soon as a train passed the last signals of a passing siding, all the opposing signals in front of it would go to stop all the way to the next passing siding. In this case, at least if a collision occurred, it would involve trains moving at 15 to 20 miles per hour at most. Of course, unless human error was involved in the situation, this situation never occurred. The dispatcher and the train orders would keep opposing trains apart. It was a common feature, though, in the Rock Island territory across eastern Iowa where I worked was so equipped. Another enhancement was double yellows. In order to give a train coming up on a red stop and proceed signal 2 yellow approach box before you'd come to the stop and proceed signal. This was pretty common as well and was done mainly to allow smoother handling of high-speed heavy freight trains. You could slow enough to just cruise along without stopping sometimes, and it allowed you to ease up on a stop and proceed signal instead of, in effect, stomping on the brake pedal to come to a screeching halt, which was not a great idea with a long, heavy freight train. I believe it's the last little enhancement that we'll talk about is for the basic automatic block signal systems and advanced systems as well. It's called approach lighting. And you have to remember that when a lot of these systems were being installed, you couldn't take commercial power for granted. And as these systems worked off primary batteries, any load you could take off the batteries prolonged their working time on a given charge. With approach lighting installed, the signals stay dark until the train enters the block immediately in advance before the signals light up. In reality, it was up to the individual railroad's engineering department. Some liked it, this feature, and some didn't. The New York Central, and I think that was because their automatic train stop system, the magnetic trackside ramps used a lot of current. The New York Central loved it, Pennsy didn't. Here locally, L&N used it for intermediate automatic block signal systems between control points in their CTC system. The absolute signals at the control points at either end of a siding only lit up if the dispatchers had lined a route, which really made it excellent for train watching because you could figure out what was probably going to happen. Illinois Central, on the other hand, was content to leave its signals just continually lit. So now we're up to some different systems, and I'm going to say this came about in 1922 because of the Interstate Commerce Commission and what they termed their enhanced train protection mandate. And it was similar to today's situation with positive train control. In the late teens and early 1920s, technology had advanced to the point where ICC felt the carriers could do more to enhance safety. But reeling from the government control in World War I and unstable economic times, the carriers were reluctant to spend much. Finally, the ICC got tired of the foot dragging and issued a ruling in 1922 that required every Class I carrier to equip at least one division with some form of ICC-approved enhanced train protection equipment. The ICC would consider a carrier's recommendation regarding which division would be equipped, but they had the final say. Usually, it was a division where heavy traffic, particularly passenger traffic, and/or freak adverse conditions such as pea soup frogs existed. The carriers could also apply for total exemption from the order, but very few of those were granted. This mandate leads to the final 3 items in today's discussion. The 3 items are automatic train control, automatic train stop, and continuous coded cap signals. So the first thing we'll talk about is automatic train control. I'll cover automatic train control first because it's the system I'm least familiar with, and for what it's worth, I consider it to be just a little bit odd, to say the least. To me, it was what you got when you didn't care enough to spend the very best. And Chicago Northwestern was the largest user, and coming from an ex-Rock Islander, you could expect me to be a little prejudiced. But in any case, all the way from Chicago to Omaha, the only wayside signals on the Chicago Northwestern were at control points. It relies on a continuous coded signal sent through the rails, similar to cab signals. In a locomotive cab, there was a box with 2 lights on it that signaled either clear or restricting. With the green clear light lit, you could proceed at maximum authorized speed. If it changed to white, restricting, and you were doing over 40 miles per hour, you had to acknowledge the change with the little lever on the box on the cab wall, which I don't know that you can't, it's been removed or you can't see it there. But you had to flip the little lever on the acknowledging thing, and within a specified short period of time, initiate a brake application to bring the speed under 40 miles per hour. And if after you got the train under 40 miles per hour, you didn't get a clear on the cab signal and the signal remained at restricting with the horn sounding, you had 70 seconds to both acknowledge the restricting and get the train speed under 20 miles per hour. If you didn't, you got a penalty brake application and bring the train to a stop. Now, this might be okay train handling with small freight or passenger train, but to me, with a big, and Northwestern did like their big trains, it was asking for trouble. Slack control would be almost non-existent, and probably the best idea would be to just let it come to a stop and hope it stopped in one piece. In the conversations I had with CN&W engineers over the years, according to them, their ATC system was responsible for its share of jewelry, i.e. knuckles and drawbars, along the right-of-way. My understanding is that the UP maintained the system until recently because the FRA refused to let them discontinue it. Now, however, with the coming of positive train control, or PTC, UP has installed their four-indication cab signaling equipment, well, again, with no wayside signals, along with CTC and the PTC system, thus making the automatic train control, or ATC, redundant, and as a result has discontinued the old ATC. And I'm sure no one misses it too much. The next thing is automatic train stop. New York Central had a different set of unsafe conditions that they wished to address, and in cooperation with their supplier of choice, General Railway Signal Company of Rochester, New York, they worked to develop this system, which came to be known as automatic train stop. In truth, the Central had the resources to develop ATS on their own without the ICC mandate, and probably would have done so in any case. But they did manage to convince the ICC that it would satisfy the conditions of the ICC's 1922 order, and were thus allowed to complete its development and installation on all the principal routes in the New York Central system. What the NYC was finding was that even after spending large sums to equip the railroad with ABS systems, they were still having an inordinate number of rear-end collisions. Invariably, if they survived, the guilty engineers would say that they had been trying to make schedule. And as it's known in the vernacular, had been riding the yellow, meaning that they had not made much, if any, attempt to comply with the approach indication and counted on the signal ahead changing from red to yellow before they got to it, figuring that the train ahead was probably going as fast as they were. No problem unless it didn't change and there were markers of the train ahead just around the corner. You have to remember, in the 1920s on the Central, there were vast numbers of passenger trains. I think it was 1927 or 28 that the record was set with 8 sections of the westbound 20th century leaving New York. And it wasn't the only train to operate in multiple sections. Okay. Mechanically, what you saw on a steam locomotive's exterior were the magnetic inductor shoe, usually on the trailing axle of the lead tender truck, which is right there. Come on, baby. The equipment box on top of the tender deck, and the reset box, which was on the back of the tender frame on the engineer side. On a diesel locomotive, usually you saw the shoe on the lead truck, or the second axle of the lead truck. And on the hood units, also there was a motor generator set to get the working voltage the ATS system required. And it also had a reset box. It would be somewhere on the frame of the locomotive, but those were all there. And then on the wayside, what you found were these magnetic inductive system ramps that activated this automatic train stop system. In operation, the ramps, placed just in advance of the wayside signals, would be energized, and if the block were clear, the system would sound a single weep on the whistle in the cab and no other action was required. If, however, the signal was displaying anything other than clear, the whistle continually sounded until the engineman acknowledged the signal by flipping the little lever on the wall. If he failed to do so within a certain time, the system would apply the brakes and bring the train to a halt. If this happened, the only way to get the brakes to release was go and open the reset box. Back here. Open the reset box and hit the reset switch inside. Of course, the wily old company had a wire seal placed on the box, so if you had to reset it, your goose was pretty much cooked as far as no one noticing it. What really doubled down on the issue for the Central, however, was their widespread adoption of the local valve pilot on most all their mainline steam locomotives. Part of this system was a speedometer in the cab that had a continuous speed tape recorder built into the top of it. The Central found that the pencil marking the tape could be made to mark the tape whenever the acknowledging lever had been moved, and thus gave an absolute proof whether the rules had been complied with or not. While in the past, the blind eye had been turned to speeding if an engineer was making schedule, the usual line from the road foreman or of engines or the superintendent was, if you can't keep the schedule, we'll find somebody who can. It became passé if it involved breaking the rules. As time wore on, the need, which mainly was lots of passenger trains, for ATS gradually fell away. And in the early 1970s, with PC's abysmal financial condition, they were allowed to discontinue its use on the system. Other big users, mainly ATSF, Santa Fe, gradually discontinued its use, and now, like ATC, the expansion of CTC and PTC, positive train control, has made it an outdated and archaic technology. Finally, the last thing is continuous coded cab signals. We've arrived at the crown jewel of enhanced protection systems and one of Penske's biggest contribution to the rail industry, continuous coded cab signals. They're still in use today and in fact have been updated and refined to the point where they're going to be around perhaps for a longer time than PRR itself was. One thing that continuous coded cab signals did share with New York Central's automatic train stop system was being born to solve a specific need. Almost all the way across the state of Pennsylvania, the Penske was in some river valley or the other. The pea soup fogs in the Juniata River Valley along the heavily trafficked Middle Division all the way from Harrisburg to Altoona were legendary. The PRR developed two signaling innovations to cope with these conditions. One was the fog-penetrating yellow toric lenses for the signals themselves. Since they were only capable of yellow light, they led to the need for the now legendary PRR position light signals, which were designed to achieve maximum sight distance in all adverse weather conditions. The other item was a continuous coded cab signal system, developed in cooperation with their supplier of choice, Union Switch and Signal Company of Swissvale, Pennsylvania. It relied on sending pulses through the rails themselves. Equipment on the locomotive picked up the pulses from the rail and converted them to light a small signal display in the cab in front of the engine. A code pulse of 180 pulses per minute caused the system to display a clear indication. 120 pulses per minute gave an approach medium indication, while 75 pulses per minute indicated approach. And the absence of a code caused the bottom restricting light to be displayed. These pulse rates had been selected so that they were not harmonically related and thus have the potential to confuse the system and give a false indication. With this system, the engine men were continuously given real-time status of the track ahead. And this is the cab signal equipment box on a Pennsylvania M1. And on most Penske engines, you'll find something like that somewhere on the locomotive running board. Their diesels had them right in front of the cab, and you could find pictures of even Conrail locomotives that had it smaller, but same equipment box right in front of the engineer's side of the cab. And this is what the Pennsylvania's box looked like inside the cab. But let me give you an illustration so you can better understand this. Suppose you're the engineer on the Broadway or the Admiral and you've passed two signals displaying approach. In a fog so heavy, you're lucky to see an engine length or so in front of you. Your cab signal display matches the wayside signal indication of approach. So you slow down. Finally, you come up on a signal displaying stop and proceed that was caused by an unfortunate crew who may not even be employed tomorrow if they stop the Broadway, on a local having a mainline switch open. Without the cab signals, you'd have to grope your way through the fog at a speed that would permit you to stop before hitting anything. In these conditions, without the cab signals, it would mean creeping at little more than walking speed through the entire 2 miles or so length of the block to the next wayside signal. But voila, the local crew snaps to attention and locks the switch back, and your cab signal indication changes to clear. Now, after moving only the length of your train, you can resume maximum authorized speed. This was a tremendous time saver because with Penske's level of traffic, one trip up by a leader cascaded back through all the following trains. On the locomotive exterior, most cab signal equipped steam locomotives had the equipment that I showed you before, and likewise on the diesels. Over the years, improvements in the electronics have made for much smaller equipment boxes, so now there's really no external evidence of cab signal equipment. But Union Pacific is probably, that is the pickup for the cab signal equipment. It's usually right behind the pilot, down close to the rail. And there is a modern, I think that's a CSX locomotive, but that's the cab signal displaying restricting right in the middle of the cab. Union Pacific was an enthusiastic convert to continuous coded cab signal, and its locomotives carry the little forward indication cab signal indicators on the front wall of their cabs to this day. CB&Q opted for a 3 indication version that otherwise looked similar. And cab signaling, it continues to be in use today, and in fact, some important lines have been converted in recent times. One notable line was the old Boston and Albany route from Boston to Albany, New York. Conrail equipped this for cab signaling with no wayside signals between the control points around 1990. So that's the end of it. We talked about what's going to be coming up. I'm at the concluding point. Any questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Most of you who are viewing today have seen the current layout, and a few of you probably remember the old layout. So in the June 1988 issue of Model Railroader, Jim Hettinger wrote about Americanizing this Kibri freight house. And as you know, both the current layout and the prior layout are all staged in New York State. So having spent a lot of time there, this was the perfect thing to add to the layout. So you'll see in a minute, but what obviously some of the stuff that we have to do to Americanize it is get rid of the European gingerbread roofing here and some of their guard work and so on like that. And as I was looking at this, the Germans must have had a lot of electrical storms over there, because I guess they got 3 lightning antennas up there. So this is what Jim Hettinger came up with. As you can see, you know, he cut off all the gingerbread and so on, and he took the part of the roof that came down, cut it off, and used it as an awning. You can't tell from this picture that was taken from the article in MR. It almost looks like a corrugated roof on the office, which matched the one that Jim used on the main freight house, but it is not. One of the things too that we'll find out that my partner in crime here, one of the things to add up to make your building look a little unique and different is the downspouts and gutters. They had them on the office house, but because of the way that Jim did this, they were not, he either elected not to use it or didn't want to work it in. So this is how it looked prior to doing a little bit of updating to it. And just for the record, this was not how the original roof looked after I started doing the upgrading to it. I said, you know, maybe this would be a nice article that, you know, you guys would be interested in. So I kind of did a little patching up of the roof and just laid it on there. But you can see that I'm not an architect, but it seemed to me that if you're going to use a metal roof on the office, that you would have probably used it on the main structure also. Once I kind of got into this, I could understand why Jim put the corrugated up, because it was a big pain in the patoot to match it up there. So here we go. I found that the Evergreen 4523 with its 3H spacing matched up perfectly with the original Kibri roof on the office here. The one thing that the seam styrene that Evergreen gives you in this package was a little bit too wide. So I went to the next smaller size to make it match up to the original Kibri roof there. And again, I found out that perhaps maybe why Jim used a corrugated roof, because you would think it would be a no-brainer, but these seams here are very thin and small, and to get those straight down the grooves, it killed a lot of TV time, but we got it there. So again, this is the one where Jim did, and I wanted to add the gutters and the downspout. So one of the things that I had to do is cut off the roof, or cut them back, the roof rafters here, so we could fit in the gutters. The other thing is, you guys know that I'm such a tall guy that my railroad probably sits a little bit lower than, you know, the average guy's layout. So, you know, we were thinking that we just didn't want to see roof up here. So, you know, we elected not to put the awning out there. So here you go, using some of the pieces from what would normally be the backside of the freight house. I was able to piece a whole gutter across there and use the downspouts. Some of them, if you maybe remembered from the original Kibri model, that when the roof came out, that they had a downspout and it angled up and came out to meet the extended piece of the roof. Just trimming those away and a little sanding, and these fit in just perfectly. The other thing that we had to do is where the supports for the extended roof came out, what were we going to do with those? So we weren't going to get any brick to match this. So the next best thing to do would be to fill in the indentations with just some styrene, paint it. Steve comes up with we think, an excellent color. of the Tamaya Air Force tan, a little bit of weathering, and we think it kind of fits in nice as a little concrete insert there. The other thing, which we'll get a little better angle at, is that Tichy, when we were building the ice dock, which is on a different part of the layout, they have some very nice lampshades here. And Steve went ahead then, and like I said, we'll see in the next slide, where made the little gooseneck, and we put them on there. The other thing is I just so happen to have some ties that good old Jim Petro gave me long time ago that he was no longer using, and he had already stained them. And instead of using the little plastic insert for a buffer or a bumper along the loading dock here, it's real wood, and I think it gives it a much better character. So the next thing is, let's do a little bit of sprucing up of the office roof. One of the things that Steve likes to refer to them as a stink pipe for like the restrooms, but in reality, we all know that our houses and buildings need to have the plumbing vented. So this is just a real quick add-on with some brass tubing, painted black, and there you go. We used the original brick for the chimney and the original concrete cap, and then Steve came up with the smoke jack here, which again gives it a little bit more character and kind of varies it up a little bit, adds some shades to the office, and we have a unique little building there. So again, looking down the side here, you can see much better the gooseneck part of the lamps, which he made from the Tichy phosphorus bronze, and told me to go ahead and make a little junction box here, which makes a lot of sense, which is pretty small, but I got it, and again adds something to this. The other thing that I thank Steve for is that he scratch built these two signs. And you might say, what's so big about scratch building a sign? Well, the big guy cut and put individually all these letters here and all the letters on the freight house. They weren't one set of decals. So it took him a lot of time to do that, and a little spice there that, as you may know, that right at the turn of the 20th century, that it was New York Central and Hudson River Railroad. So kind of makes this, gives it a little flavor of being an old freight house. We stole the Railway Express written out in the emblem. We stole that from a Walther's kit that I had extra. And you may not be able to see or tell from the picture here, but one of the things that Steve thought about that I would never is that, these are decals. And if we were to go to, especially on the logo there, if we were going to put those right on the brick, the decal would sink in, and it would look like maybe it was painted on. And we all know that it was a metal sign. So Steve mounted it on what, 30, 40,000?
No, I think it's like 20,000
styrene. Yeah, it's 20,000 styrene, and then decaled, or attached the decal to it, and then mounted it to the building to look, so it looks just like a metal sign was placed there. Added the phone box here, a few figures, the union guy giving the management some hand gesture, I don't know. So then, after all that, a little bit of ground foam around, and we're ready to accept our first boxcar for some freight. Just as a side note here, all the little details that you can add to really kind of help make the scene. You know, the battery boxes here, the signal case, and by the way, the signals that you see here, Steve scratch built those. So, which he had said, you know, if I'm going to do this for you, then we need a good looking scene here. So get your T. Heine and high gear and finish that freight house. So backing off a little bit now, we think we have a very nice scene at Batavia. We have a newly built, remodeled station, thanks to Steve. The backdrop, thanks to Stan White. Both of them, Bob Kukler made the trees, and Bob and Stan White planted them. And by the way, Bob's selling some of these trees at scale. So if you'd like to pick up some really, really nice trees, you can pick them up at scale there. So there you go. There's our just about finished scene at Batavia. We have a few more details to put in. I think we're done, but you can see that I think we did a good job of doing a little bit more than what Jim Hediger started out with some 20 plus years ago. But we think if you go Google some freight houses, you'll see that this resembles quite a few of them, especially in the Northeast. So I thank you. That's what I got today. And any suggestions, comments, questions?
Okay, Russ, thank you. I'll unmute everybody and let the peanuts fly. And here's Joe Fields.
Hello, everyone. Ron alluded to a few minutes ago, I am working on my last certificate, which is scenery. And according to the NMRA requirements for that, you have to complete at least 32 square feet of scenery in HO. And the first few pictures I'm going to show, it's 25 square feet. It's a diorama that I built of my wife's farm up in Indiana that she was born and raised on. And she's assisting me also today where I can change pictures. I got 2 clipboards, so as I feed her one, she'll be feeding me another one. So hopefully this is going to go smooth. But anyway, the first picture that's up, this, by the way, this farm diorama, it's like I say, it's 25 square feet, 5 foot by 5 foot. And all the buildings on this diorama are completely scratch built, including the trees and everything that's on it is scratch built. So the first picture up is a picture of the old farmhouse. This was the house that my wife was born and spent most of her life in. I think they built the new farmhouse, which I'm going to be moving a picture up there right now of that. That was built in 76. And it, of course, a whole lot more modern and all that kind of stuff. But up until the farm was sold, the old one was still standing also. So I was able to get some good pictures and also measurements. And everything in the diorama scale HO scale feet between buildings and distances to different things and stuff like that. So this next shot is a picture of the just kind of a row. You got the new house, the old farmhouse, and then you got the 3-car garage in the far background of this picture. This particular shot is what they called the new barn. The old one was closer to the original farmhouse, but it caught on fire and completely burnt to the ground. So they built this new one. This is the front of the barn. And the next shot will be a picture of the back of the barn. And these items over here, these are cribs for grain and stuff like that for cattle to eat out of. And at that particular time, there wasn't any available on the market or, at hobby shops or anything like that. So those are also scratch built. So they were quite fun. This shot here is, you got some corn cribs, hay storage down here in the foreground. You got a machine shed, another machine shed, and this blue one over here, this is the new machine shed. Takes a lot of sheds to store equipment and so forth like that. And of course, as we move on through the pictures, this shot here is you have a wood pile here, and I took a piece of wax paper and put over it because the picture of the real one has a cover over it to kind of keep the wood a little bit from getting so wet and so forth like that. So that's a piece of wax paper that made it look like that. This picture, or this building right here, that was the old outhouse before when they was still living in the old farmhouse. And then you got some tanks over here to fuel the tractors and so forth like that. And if you'll notice this wire running across through here, that's an electric. In real life, it was an electric wire to keep the cattle back on the other side of that. This particular picture here is one of the farrowing pens for the pigs. And it's a very low to the ground building in real life, so it's not a very, very tall building, but it had a lot of places in there for a lot of pigs. And of course, with all the stuff and scenery, the more detail you can add, the higher you'll score when the judges start judging your work. And this is all these items through here, the bush hog and the chisel plow, all this stuff in here, it's all scratch built. This little plow over here, disc, the junk piles, I even scratch built the junk piles. So like I say, the more detail you can put is, and Russ, I think Russ pointed some of that out on his freight house that he was showing us a few minutes ago. The more detail you can put into a scene, the better it's going to look and as it goes along. Okay, that's the end of the diorama, which, like I say, covers 25 square feet. So I have another 7 feet to go for my 32 square feet. So here we are. We're in the layout room now, and I've started, as I call it, the real scenery, because I've been building buildings that I've shared with you guys pictures of those and other gatherings that we've had. And this particular one here, this is where the tunnel scene's at on one end of it. And I'm using Howard Zane's crisscross cardboard strips to kind of make the frame for the mountainsides and so forth like that. And then after that's put up, and the mount or the rock work here around the tunnel porter and so forth, that's all made out of ceiling tile. I just break off pieces of it and start hot gluing them and forming them and making them go up the way I want it to look. And once I get it up the height I need it and so forth like that, then in a few minutes I'll show some pictures of where I put the covering over top of it. This is a picture. This is again following Howard Zane's methods of his scenery construction, and he uses red rosin paper to cover up those cardboard strips. As you can see, you can cut them for different shapes, and you just hot glue them to those cardboard strips, and it's real easy. There's really not a whole lot of mess as far as putting plaster over screen wire, which I've done that before, but this is just a much easier way. And as you can see, the rock work here is now covered with joint compound. I get the little small buckets of it that Home Depot, and I start putting it on there with a wet paintbrush, small wet paintbrush, and because that smooths it out to where you don't have a whole lot of manipulating it or sanding it or anything like that after you get it on there. Here's another shot. This is after the rocks. I've added some color to them, different shades of some white streaks, some black, some burnt sienna, however I say that word. Sienna. Okay, there you go. So it's starting to shape up and look, like the rock work. This is a scene showing the rock work and some of the showing some of the trees that I've added, and these are puff balls, as they call them. And of course, I watched quite a few YouTube videos on doing scenery work, and if I'm not really sure how to do something other scenery or whatever the case may be, I'll watch YouTubes. It's amazing what you can learn from those things. And one guy was showing, how he did puff balls and all that, and basically all it is wood fiber or fiber polyfiber. There we go. I'll get that in a minute. Polyfiber, and you spray them with real cheap hairspray, and then you roll them around in some Woodland Scenics ground foam, and they take on the shape of what would be like a forest canopy, like in Eastern Kentucky, which is kind of sort of what I'm modeling, because that's where I'm from, or born at, was down in Whitesburg, Kentucky. And they make a pretty good tree line. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So that's kind of what a little bit of finishing on that little part of here. Now we're back to the coming on around to the further away from the tunnel, going towards the little town of Whitesburg. And again, using the cardboard strips and the rosin paper. In the next shot here, the rosin paper is added to it. And as you can see, I kind of zigzagged it up here at the top to kind of give it a contour at the top of the mountainside. It's indented right here to make it look like mountainsides. And one of the things I was trying to achieve in this scene was, in a few minutes, I'll show you some pictures of the river, which goes right through here where that Pepsi can has been there since 2001. It's no longer there anymore. I may keep it as a souvenir, just, memories or whatever. But anyway, I wanted to create this river scene that went and like it was disappearing between this mountainside and this mountainside. And you'll see in a few minutes the river scene, it did that pretty well. Now, another thing that I like to use for rock work is pine bark nuggets. They're the big ones, big pine bark nuggets. And you can make some pretty fantastic looking rock work out of those. I know some people sometimes even leave them the natural color that the pine bark nuggets are. I don't do that. I'll spray them with gray primer, and then I'll come back and do the highlights on them and with whites and blacks and different things like that. This scene here is I wanted a natural tunnel portal for these two lower tracks here. And so they're created out of pine bark nuggets also. And the next picture, this is what the pine bark nuggets that you saw in the picture ago, this is how they turned out after I got them all painted and some weeds or grass, whatever you want to call it, growing in between some of the cracks and so forth. And you can see right in here where the tunnel portal has had that same effect with the paint and so forth like that. And down here in the bottom part, this is the beginning of my riverbed right here. and it goes under the little culvert here on the bottom tracks, and then continues on around and disappears in between the two mountains. This shot here is showing where I put the joint compound down for the riverbanks and some of the rock work at the bottom of that red rosin paper. Okay, this shot here is you got this on this side over here. You got the ceiling tile that I broke up in pieces and made the rocks out of, and over here you've got the pine bark nuggets, and then the bed of the stream here, that's wood or joint compound that I put in there just like I did on the rock work with a wet paintbrush and smoothed it out and so forth. But I left it a little bit rougher because I wanted this to give the effect of fast moving water. And here's what my streams look like. They're a little out of focus there, but that'll give it. And all that is just I put glossy matte medium on it, and then highlighted it with dry white paint, dry brushed it on to give the effect that it's fast moving water going down through there. And here's a scene how the rock work and a little bit better focused picture of the river there. And the bridges are temporarily set in place at this time. Those two bridges there, the deck girder bridges there, they're scratch built from a kit, but it took 4 kits to build them. They're 190 scale feet each to span this going across through there. Okay, this scene starting over here in the corner and going, it would be east on my layout. Oh no, actually west. I'm sorry, west on the layout. I took I guess it's like a 1/2 inch. What was a 4x8 sheet of the foam board for insulation foam board, and I cut out, kind of wiggled the hot knife going down through there, and then ended up. I measured it out, and it's 73 inches long, which was really great because I could lay it flat down on where I was working at and do all the puff balls and all that kind of stuff. But then when I started trying to get it glued to the backdrop, that was another ball game. It didn't want to cooperate. But I finally managed to get it up there. And again, all the rock work and this section of the backdrop here, this is all pine bark nuggets. These up here, I've got a little bit more browns and so forth, and the coloration of those. The clouds on my backdrop, those are just took like a 2-inch paintbrush, I guess it was, dipped it in some white paint and started stippling to get the cloud effect up there. And this is looking towards the end of that 73-inch piece of backdrop that I put up there. Okay.
Whoops, sorry.
Okay, now that we've got the backdrop up, it's time to play around, see how the buildings are going to fit and so forth like that. I built 4 Atlas water towers many years ago. Everything's painted up in what I consider my railroad's color schemes, which is gray with blue trim. So this is where the station sits on this particular section of the layout. And this is what it looks like basically in a finished scene. Now I've got this done this past week, but stations there, you got a little parking lot over here. You got some taxi cabs waiting to take the people into the town from the station. And the station is an old Sidem kit, but I took evergreen clapboard siding and covered the walls with that. I used what came with that kit as a template, and then I cut out the clapboard siding. It is lighted and will be lit on the layout. Added a small tree over here. I think they're JLT trees or some I think that's the manufacturer. Okay. And then Tom, I've always admired your Kentucky Mine Supply Company. So I've got a Kentucky Mine Supply Company too. This is one of the, I think Walters calls them the background buildings. It's just like an inch and a half or 2 inches deep or something other like that. I didn't like the dock that came with it, so I scratch built a dock out of cardboard. The letters up here for Kentucky Mine Supply Company, my wife was gracious enough to cut those out on her die cutting machine. And she cut me out 2 sets. They're glued, the case, well, all the letters are glued on top of one another. And then I made the sign holder to have it raised up above the roof up there. And here's what this scene's looking like after the track has been ballasted and a tree added there in the corner just out of the way where the truck can back into the dock. And I added some rail stops here to keep them from shoving the car off the track and so forth. And you can see over here, in this part over here, well, it's not so noticeable, but anyway, I'll turn the camera a little bit. You can see the REA trucks that are backed into the station dock there. And the road right here, that still has to have some white striping on it. But that's something that'll be done here eventually. And then just on the other side of the Kentucky Mine Supply, I added a few evergreens and some scenery around the switch that's there to finish out that little section. This is a shot of the layout looking east on it into the tunnel. And the last shot that I've got here is a shot looking west. All the track there's been ballasted up into the curve there, and the scenery and so forth will just continue. Now out here where the power pack is, there's a section that sets up on top of that, and that's where the town of Whitesburg will be built. That's where all those buildings that I built, I guess it was last year right after the pandemic thing started, I was building buildings and so forth. And that's where they'll all set. And there'll be 2 more industries at least, and that'll be served by rail. There's a turnout that comes off right back here in this area, right back from where the picture stops there. There's a turnout that goes into that would take the siding into the town to the 2 entries. That's the dairy and the canning company that'll be there. And that's about all I've got today. Somebody has anybody has any questions or anything like that, just give me a shout.
We sure want to say thanks to Sue for assisting you. We'd all be better off if we had a wife at our elbow a lot of the time.
You're
Thank you, Sue.
welcome. You're welcome. Merry Christmas, everybody.